Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 446. Antlers, Assumptions, and Artillery. The guard looks deeply unamused as he watches Bjorn enter the ship. Something wrong, little man? The massive Carib woman asks, turning dramatically to show off her figure and muscles. Holly, don't tease, Bjorn chides her. Oh, come on, he looks so serious. Holly, we're guests, we don't want to have that status revoked and be tossed out, Bjorn says. Okay, fine. I want to see the bridge. I never got a chance to do that on the Dauntless. So long as you're willing to be respectful to the bridge, crew, and captain, I don't see an issue with that, Bjorn states. Unless there is something I don't know, soldier. No, however, keep your civilians under control. While we may be acting partially as an embassy, we will not tolerate disruption or sabotage of any sort. Calm down. A physical trainer, stylist, and an accountant aren't exactly the type to hurt people. Worst I've seen them do is get too into dancing and bump into people in the club, Bjorn remarks. Not our fault if some girls can't keep pace, Lil says with a swing of her hips. Do I actually have to register a woman's hips as weapons? The guard asks in an annoyed tone. No, these girls are civilians. I am the only one armed, and you have the full list of my legally owned and legally carried weapons as requested, Bjorn states calmly. And that rack of antlers? The guard asks, and Holly suppresses a flinch. A natural part of her body, one that signifies age and maturity. You should see the truly ancient Carib. It's like they're carrying a forest, Bjorn says, as the guard gives Holly another look. Bjorn gestures for him to lean close, and he whispers into his ear. She's had to go into hiding and had to have her antlers pruned. A deeply humiliating experience. Stop drawing attention to it, please. I see, Worsham, the guard states as he evaluates the group again. There are restrictions on where you can go. If the door is locked or guarded, then you are not to even touch it. Understand? Of course, Bjorn states. How many secrets do humans have that you're this protective? Salas asks. That was the wrong question to ask, Bjorn says as the guard now glares. I'm going to have to go over your request again, in triplicate. Scene change. The inevitable, undaunted arcology, Zal War. Sorry, Salas says again after they finally get inside. She was drooping, which was a bit of an issue as it meant her tail was hanging limp rather than held up as it normally is. So Emma is now holding it up and off the floor to stop her from accidentally using her tail as a broom. Salas, the thing you need to remember is that I am very, very calm for a human, and the undaunted are calmer and more put together than the people sent on the inevitable here. Have I screwed up? You've poked at a delicate situation, but you haven't done anything irretrievable. Mouthing off is one thing, but actually doing something is another. If the situation is so delicate, then why are we allowed on? Because while observer woo is the official word on things, they do want to see and observe things as much as possible, Bjorn says as he points to a camera. Case in point. They're gathering data on what Lyrak dress like and how you girls express yourselves, and Salas straightens up immediately and flicks the fur on her tail back into a pristine position. And why didn't you explain that we were being watched sooner? Emma asks. I thought it was obvious. We're on a military ship. Only the bathrooms and personal quarters are without cameras. Not to mention I've been talking about the rumors of Harold, Bjorn says as he looks around. This ship has eyes watching its eyes most likely. Really? Really? Holly's antlers begin glowing for a moment, and a small wave of axiom travels down the corridor. They're everywhere. We're completely surrounded by... She begins before a door opens and a man with pure white eyes, 2 red slashes under his eyes and a blue diamond on his forehead, leans out and looks at them all. Instructor Veers. Operative Jameson, Bjorn answers, and there is a nod from the strange man, who ducks away again. Bjorn then walks up and opens the door only to find a small oxygen closet. Wait, I've seen a room like this before, Holly notes. Not much of a room, Lil says. It's part of life support, right? It is. It's a backup life support chamber. It has specialized devices that can produce more oxygen to repressurize part of the ship and restore the atmosphere without axiom. There are similar chambers in submarines. Basically, these here are oxygen candles. They have a burnable chemical compound in them that releases a large amount of oxygen when set on fire. And as gases take more space than solids, This means that this closet technically has enough shear mass in it to repressurize the ship on its own, provided that the holes are sealed. And there are many, many such closets all over. But isn't that dangerous? Oxygen burns and a candle means that it has a great deal of fire and heat involved. That's right. You need to handle them properly, store them properly, and activate them properly to use them safely. And I remember being drilled on these until I could go through the process blindfolded. Prove it. Not here. Just opening this up is likely pushing someone's buttons. This is, after all, an emergency backup system, not something to casually fiddle with. Bjorn says, letting everyone take one last good long look at the oxygen closet and then closing the door. Still, it's one of the big features about this kind of ship. It's a tough piece of work with an outright silly amount of backups. Most of the internal doors are rated for external use and automatically close if the internal pressure drops too much. If this ship opened its bay doors in the upper, but still breathable atmosphere, the systems would detect it and make it so each door would close and can only be manually opened until the system is reset. But what if that system is hacked or short circuits? That's the beauty of it. It can't. The sensor is mechanical. You have to physically touch the system in question to start toying with it. He then points to the vents. They're in there. Makes them a bitch to clean, but is the kind of backup and safety system that lets you sleep very comfortably despite being on the first of a new type of craft. You had a hard time sleeping on the Dauntless? At first, I had to review the specs a few times to calm down and really get comfortable sleeping. That, and it was sleeping while strapped down so I wouldn't float off. No gravity makes it awkward. What does that even look like? Emma asks. Pardon? I've never even been in a zero-gravity situation. All ships I've been on have been with full gravity, Emma says, and Bjorn smiles. Then I have a few things to show you. Not only what a zero-G bed and toilet look like, but there's a corridor that runs the length of the ship that is designed to use zero gravity, and outside of cruel space, it has special bits of anti-gravity in it to maintain it. Really? Emma asks, and he nods. 10 minutes later, Emma thrashes a little as she tries to reorient herself, but keeps misjudging things with all four arms and drifts into the nearest wall. Careful, I told you to tie down your hair for a reason, Bjorn says as he drifts over and gently braces himself against the wall on the floor to help stabilize her. How do you do this? Calm, measured movements. Think of it like swimming with a really light touch. Bjorn advises before gently pushing away and drifting through the air. Like this. Every move you make shifts how you move. He then gently moves backwards and turns through the air until he's kneeling on the ceiling and pushes off to drift over and catches onto the ladder that the girls are using to steady themselves. See? Calm, like swimming. Nice and easy. Vera is standing on the wall next to the rail. And this is for moving quickly? I don't see how. What do you grip onto? It's magnetic. And the longer-sleeved uniforms have insignia on the sleeve, Bjorn says. But you have a short-sleeve uniform on. That's why I do it this way instead, he says, shifting through the air and landing with his boots to the rail. The steel toe behind the leather pulls him to the rail, and the rail pulls him along till he catches the next ladder down, swings around, and plants his feet on the opposite rail. See? That little bit of armor is practical in more ways than it first seems. He catches the ladder even as Holly slowly uses bits of axiom to fly through the air with a slight smile. It's so easy like this. Lils has started walking and then running along the walls, floor, and ceiling to move in a circle faster and faster until she stumbles and would crash if Bjorn didn't catch her. Sorry, I wanted to see if it could be done. She has to adjust her skirt several times to not flash her underwear, as the quick bit of racing seems to have broken her ability to orient herself. Okay, I think that's enough zero gravity for now. Who wants to see other parts of the ship? Bjorn asks. They agree. Scene change. The inevitable, bridge, undaunted arcology, Zolwar. The door opens and Captain Rangi turns to find a massive undaunted soldier saluting him. Captain, sir. And you are? Instructor Bjorn Veers. Here showing my civilian family the ship. I wanted to pay my respects properly and set the tone for when they look upon the bridge. I see, Captain Rangi says as he looks to the side and sees a massively muscled woman covered in gray fur with white highlights, and a big brown head of hair beneath a pair of antlers. She looks like a reindeer woman. Behind her are four others, much more normal, as far as that term can be used on the wider galaxy, not overly muscled but still overly proportioned. Three of them seem to have evolved from squirrels, one of them a rabbit with an inexplicable second set of arms. Carib, Lirak, and rabbis, if I am not mistaken, he says, and Instructor Veers nods. Can I trust them to behave as I speak to you in my office? Of course. Good, follow me, please, Captain Rangi says as he stands up from his command couch and walks to his office. Bjorn follows him and he gives a reassuring smile to his girls. He stands at attention as Captain Rangi takes a seat. Instructor Veers, what do you think this is? Sir? What do you think this ship is? I think this ship is a pissed-off, flailing attempt by people whose view of reality was proven wrong to try and make the world make sense. Do you? I respect that it's an impressive piece of military hardware, but its intention is fairly contemptible. You know about the extra orders, I trust? I do. Did you know that for a lot of us we were explicitly told that kidnapping aliens to drag back to Earth and see if and how they die as we transport them was part of it? All unlawful excess orders were released. Care to guess why I am particularly incensed by those orders? Instructor, we are off topic. Why have you requested then escorted civilians onto my ship? Because I want to show them the ship. That's all. Is it? It is. Bjorn then smiles. It's a funny little thing I've learned since coming out here. Something I might have learned on Earth, and something that just sounds like a trite saying until you put it into practice. But the best revenge is living well. So you're taking revenge. I'm living well. If that bothers the people that don't like me, then it's another win to add on to the win that's already there. Oh? Yeah, my intention with the ship is to use it to bring more life to my stories of the Dauntless, to the girls that have never left this little metropolis world because it's more convenient in our busy lives than taking a couple days off. And this little confrontation now? Entirely your doing. Remember, you asked for me. So you're here entirely for touristy reasons. Not because there's some secret that I assume there might be, or some kind of protection thing going on. So the rumors of Harold being that wild is true. You were bracing for the next whatever the hell to happen? Yes. Well, I'm afraid it won't come from me. I'm more burning time before a bit of possible drama in my own life, or rather in Holly's. She has drama? You'll need to sign an NDA before I answer that with any clarity. I'm not that curious, but I'll stand down the quiet alert. I'd tell you to calm down, but we both have basic pattern recognition. You've had a trip of it the last several stops. Yes, we have. Still, if something were to happen on Zalwar, what would it be? Honestly, I suspect stowaways, spy work, or sabotage. Anyone who shows up with a big gun in the area is going to find themselves drowning in lasers and plasma. If anything happens to the inevitable, it will be focused on the inevitable and not a larger effect. The rest of the galaxy won't tolerate it. So take more of Mr. Jameson's advice while landed, and potentially get some private streams on the ship to help out. Get used to them here and have them stand guard when you arrive on Centris. I see. Thank you for your time, and please do enjoy your tour of the inevitable. Thank you. I especially look forward to seeing the Ram and the Rad. Into a Wider Galaxy Part 447, Antlers, Assumptions, and Artillery. And that unity and focus is what allows our forces to strike against such potent forces. Lady Falarin explains. That does explain the footage that I reviewed. Thank you for clarifying things. There are several files showing training drills and combat exercises of our forces on the data slate I have given you. It should serve very well in demonstrating our skills. I find it most interesting in that you have dedicated anti-adept targets. The reason is less exciting than you think, or rather much more practical than you're likely imagining, which is the local defense forces required by law in the Loblin Empire is usually sufficient to deal with anything shy of a dedicated warband, except where adepts come in. Yes, the endless X factor of the galaxy, the adept, singular men and women who can change the fate of worlds and even reshape their faces with enough power. Such people are blessedly rare, but they don't need to be anywhere near that potent to be an enormous threat. The Undaunted are actually a good example of it. The brand that many of them use serves several purposes. The first is as an incredible suit of armor with nearly no points of failure. The second is a statement of sheer intent. Those that recognize what is on the left shoulder of so many men can hardly help but feel fear. Are Axiom brands truly so painful? Oh yes. When I first learned that one of the Undaunted in my presence had such a brand, I immediately offered shelter, witness protection, and more. It took a great deal of explaining on their part to convince me that they had walked into it. According to him, it is one area in the Undaunted that any undignified behavior can be accepted, including soiling oneself, screaming, weeping, crying out for one's mother. An Axiom brand burns so painfully that it ignores deadened nerves, either through injury or drug. It doesn't matter if you've had no feeling in that limb, it hurts. Even synths with no pain receptors on any part of their body still scream in agony when an Axiom brand is applied. There is silence between them. And those Axiom brands are fairly basic. Think about that. The soldiers of an adept and adepts themselves can be casually immune to standard weaponry. They need special tactics because if unusual amounts of force are needed, it's often because of an adept. Most polities make use of bounty hunters. Offering a great price for bringing in a dangerous adept is, now we do make some use of bounty hunters, but generally this is as much a test for recruitment or for criminals that are good at hiding or have left our borders. Adepts are a threat to any society, but also part of a society. Individuals who can simply decide that they have had enough and venting their wrath upon the world. Too dangerous to leave alone, too useful to drive away? Observer Wu asks. It is the balancing act that all societies must find. Ours is to be ready for them and to encourage their proper excellence. There have been mistakes in the past, of course. No solution is perfect, but we strive ever more to improve. Lord Hardytail Schmidt showed me the helm that was once the head of the creature, or its controller. It's hard to tell where the beast ended and the three merged women began. He made mention of a technique to create gestalts, was it? It's a dangerous and relatively fragile technique no longer in use, but it does allow enormous boosts in Axiom ability. Physically merging three different women is a rather unique side effect, but not completely unheard of. It's just most people have the sense to disengage from the gestalt and pull away when that starts to happen. I do apologize for asking the next few obvious questions. I basically have a form list I have to go over every time. But what are the standard and minimal ways to prevent an adept from causing harm? If you don't have your own adept to counter them, then Tri-Tight is the most simple and effective answer. Most bounty hunter teams have at least one sharpshooter or stealth expert armed with Tri-Tight weaponry that will be able to deal with a rampaging adept, and most adepts know it too. Those who are skilled enough to grow in such power generally aren't so foolish. The real danger is in short-sighted specialists, or fools who find out one of the shortcuts. I believe that the Undaunted have been referring to their collection of shortcuts as technomancy. Are these shortcuts well known? They are not well known, but they're not exactly secrets either. It's more encouraged to lay still. Information-wise, the Loblin Empire makes heavy use of many of them. Openly even, however, the training before we teach these secrets emphasizes mental stability and proper stress management to ensure a minimum of mental strain. By comparison, actually learning the vaunted techniques takes maybe a fraction of the time, at most. And besides anti-adept soldiers, what is the most common use of adepts in the Loblin Empire? Metamaterial creation and manipulation. There are many starship components, particularly in power cores and engines, that require either extremely energy-intensive techniques or extremely long techniques to create properly. Transmutation adepts are mass employed to produce these components for a fraction of the cost and time. They're all paid a small fortune on the regular, but they provide such value we still have the standard cost reduced to a tenth at the least. And with such regular good pay, and being very well regarded socially, Lady Falarin adds, it means that most Loblin adepts would move into the industrial sector, if not the armed forces. Observer Wu notes. Then there is a slight change in Lady Falarin's demeanor. Have we run short of time? I'm afraid so. The burden of command means that you are rarely in command of your own time, Lady Falarin states. She then rises up out of her chair. It was an absolute delight to illuminate the glories of the Lablan Empire. However, this joy must be cut short. My apologies. Oh, no. Thank you very much for your time. You have been the soul of courtesy and generosity, Lady Falarin, as is my duty and privilege as a noble of Lablan. Now let me see you out, and I pray that your next meeting is as fruitful as this one was. That's a high standard, Observer Wu notes. Oh no, just what should be the standard, no less. Now come, I'm afraid I have another meeting that has arrived somewhat early, and while they will no doubt be able to wait until their appointed time, we are rather close to that as is. 10 minutes later, the small vehicle is flying to a lower part of the Falarin arcology to get a more ground-level view of things after the interview. What it reveals is that the arcology is much the same, whether in the upper levels or the lower one. The only reason it can't be called gilded is that gilding generally refers to gold and not silver and crystal. The more common citizens aren't as richly adorned as Lady Falarin. However, silks are common and all in pale colors, just a hair off white itself. You were a lot more agreeable last time, a voice says, and Observer Wu focuses his gaze to see an Urthani woman and a Drin having an argument. Last time I was damn near, literally gutless compared to now. Do you think I'm going to let you take advantage of me? Again, the Urthani demands. 2 antennae, average-sized wings, neck and claws. A robust Urthani? Or was there another type? Silk weaver? I'm not taking advantage of you. These are fair prices for the services rendered. The Drin protests. These are the prices you offer untrained teenagers to barely avoid breaking the silk, Mullah. I am a professional. I have given you high-quality work for decades now, and I refuse to let the money I am owed for the quality of the work I produce be left in someone else's purse. And the quality of your silk has gone down. These threads are coarser and rougher than the bolts you used to weave, Mala protests. And they are still worth 10 times the amount you've paid me in raw quality alone. You're lucky I'm not demanding back pay. How am I to sell anything and make any credit to pay anyone if the quality of my wares suddenly halves? At best, the Drin demands, gesturing upwards with one pair of arms and to the sides with another. Maybe if I could be properly compensated into actually working at the level you demand, then the quality of your wares wouldn't plummet. Don't do this to me, Silky. We have a good thing going. You had a good thing going while I huddled away afraid in the corner. I'm not afraid anymore. I demand to be paid fairly. For silk that the tundra worms would turn their noses at? That's the quality you paid for. You want better silk? Then pay for it. This is the worst possible time, Silky. There is an entire pilgrim fleet in orbit. They're following their new saints and Urthani silk. Everything is selling high. Please work with me. We can renegotiate. But the metal is hot. We need to hammer out our possible profits now. I want it official. You're paying market price for every bolt of silk you get from me. Double on a rush. Double? 10% more on the rush. 175 standard price. Full and a fifth. I'm not settling for 120%. I want 170. Final offer or I look for another moth. 150 market value on a rush job. Done. Thank the goddess. Okay, let's get this official and get me my silk. Proper silk, not these coarse cloths. Okay, fine. All right, let's get out of public. We have an audience and that's just embarrassing, Mala says, and Silky turns to give the group a glare. What do you want? The Urthani demands. Observer Wu merely raises an eyebrow. Clear out Cloakin. Wait. Your bodies match your images. You're not Cloakin. No. Observer Wu states, and her compound eyes shift too as she focuses on one then another as her and Mala's antenna twitch. They share a look. You're humans, Mala notes. Not undaunted? No. The other ship. I'd heard that's where 2 of the new primal saints are on, a blue laser and red blade. And Blackstaff is with Lord Skidaway, the Urthani says. She suddenly looks uncertain. Have you met him? What's he like? Archean Buckets, the one you call Blackstaff, is an unassuming man whose passions take him to the wilderness. He comes alive and grows excited when documenting and learning about any animal he can find, no matter its size or habitat. That staff you saw was so that he could fend off an animal that might turn on him without hurting it. Emmanuel, Jasper Blue, Skitterway, Emperor of Lacran, and First Earthani Primal, is a complicated man that seems simple at first. He is dutiful, he is dedicated, and he is frankly benevolent. But he also seems convinced that every problem is his problem, and he focuses on solving his problems. And he seems to think that every problem on his world is his to shoulder. From what I can tell of becoming a primal was an almost accidental side effect to that sheer sense of responsibility. Responsibility? He was in war against some kind of shadow monster, one that could steal bodies and brutalize souls. He found out how to fight the monster, and it used a desperation attack on him. The only way to return after being hit by that attack was to become primal. So that's what he did. And what happened then? After that, the enemy he could barely fend off was no longer a threat or challenge. He slew the shadow in a single move and then forced them to pass on rather than use their evil power to return from death. Observer Wu explains, and the Earthani looks awestruck. Now that I've answered a couple of questions, could you answer a couple of mine? I'm an observer sent from the human homeworld to learn about the galaxy. You girls no doubt have an opinion on the Undaunted, or at least on one registered member. Oh, what do you want to know? Mala asks. Just general opinions and anything you think is worth bringing up. This isn't an interrogation. I'm not looking for some kind of legal defense or anything. Just gathering data. Too good to be true, honestly, Mala says. But it has to be. I molted, and now I weigh nearly twice as much in sheer muscle, exoskeleton reinforcement, and organs. Not to mention how much I eat now, Silky replies. That's the confusing part. It sounds made up, but it's not, Mala says with a sigh. It's way too complicated for me. I'm a seamstress, not a political analyst. I'm still working on refining this skill and the skills of business. I don't have time to research like that. Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 448, Antlers, Assumptions, and Artillery. Blar, he mutters as he wakes up and his consciousness swims back in. How was it? No change, completely consistent axiom output whether conscious or not. We knew you were still making more while asleep, but not that there was literally no difference between asleep and awake, Giria says as Harold shakes off the axiom sleep effect. He had been down for a total of 15 seconds. Not much time, but he had been forced into a REM sleep and then out of it. It hadn't even registered on the axiom pouring out of him, not even a ripple in the sheer stream of power. Okay, so all total, you are outputting as much axiom as 20 people. It is flowing in a swirling pattern around your person, but avoiding the area between the three markings on your face, and the pattern suggests that the axiom is coming from the markings and fleeing your eyes, the doctor notes. Finally, the personalized axiom has not been influenced by your emotions, unless you are deliberately messing with these tests or are a literal sociopath. I've done some pretty insane things, but I'd like to think I'm not that far gone, Harold remarks with a grin, and he's back up to speed. Giria notes, that I am. Read out, please. Here you are. The doctor states, and Harold nods before passing a handful of coins to her. You know, generally bribes start out before the favor. It's not a bribe, it's a gift and appreciation. You did me a solid, never even brought up pay. Here's 5 times the standard fee. Thank you. Harold replies, and she just stares as she sees that there are Proudian coins in there. This is more than 5 times, she says. What, you don't charge a premium for drop-ins? Harold asks. No. Well, you got one. Thank you again. Why? You're a doctor. Lives are in your hands more often than mine. Anyone that disrespects that is a fool. Careful, Harold. You just confirmed your very presence is sexy after all, Giria says in amusement. I am married, thank you very much. Hell, this money is going to go into my daughter's education more than anything. There we go. Good money, goodly earned, set for a good purpose. A good day, Harold says. Now I assume I wasn't asleep long enough to miss Uma's tournament. They're not starting for a little while yet. You were down for a minute at most. 15 seconds. Forced sleep for 15 seconds, then a little longer for you to wake up naturally as I went over the data, the doctor says. Right. Thank you again. This data should help my brother quite a bit, Harold says before holding out his hand for the doctor, who stares at it. It's a handshake. She takes his hand and shakes it, holding the back of his hand with hers rather than grabbing his hand, palm to palm. Close enough. Have a good day, doctor, he says. Did I do it wrong? She asks, and he motions with his hand, and she copies it by holding her left hand out. You use the opposite like this, Harold says, dropping his right hand and bringing up his left to grab hers and give it a shake. See? Palm to palm. A strange gesture. It evolved from a weapons check, if I understand. Basically, you offer respect by tying up your main combat hand and begin negotiations, I think. It's a pretty old and ubiquitous gesture, Harold says. Interesting. Anyways, thank you again, and I'm off to make sure that my Takra wife doesn't feel neglected. So much has been happening and all of it revolving around me. Feels like I'm not holding up my end. Miss Devastation, this is the same man that has taken a group of warriors on a massive adventure, that has seen them well paid, well respected, well supplied, and well fucked for months straight while changing the course of galactic history, right? Yes, Giria says in an amused tone. And he thinks he's not doing enough? The doctor further inquires. He's in the room too, part of the conversation even, Harold states. He's more than a little silly and has personal standards that a primal would struggle to reach. I would know. I appear to have activated the family stealth gift. How intriguing, Harold says. He certainly does seem to be a mystic mixture of warrior man and family man, doesn't he? A good catch. I first saw him trying to fry my ancestress with a point-blank gamma radiation bombardment laser. He considered it a decent opening salvo. She thought it was cute. I agreed, Giria notes. But have I become completely unnoticeable? It is time to test, Harold states dramatically. He then makes a dramatic step towards Giria and leans up against her and pokes her in the side. She ignores him. How interesting. More testing is required. He keeps forgetting that lives are longer lived and usually far more impersonal. He's outright cuddly. It's so cute, Gira explains, even as Harold is now standing with his feet planted at either side of her tail and has one arm wrapped around her stomach and another over her shoulder. She reaches back to grab onto him with her lowest pair of arms. The doctor is struggling not to laugh. An interesting reaction. Is it instinctual or have I been detected? Harold asks. Does he often just vanish without notice? That's the funny thing about him as a warrior. His combat instincts come from an assassin. His idea of a fair fight is when he sets explosives or hits so hard and fast no one can see it coming, Giria says as she leans back against Harold a little. But the vanishing? It turns out his family has some kind of protection, something old and deep, and that worked even in cruel space. We think. We need to confirm it, but he can make himself look incredibly uninteresting to counter his heartbreaking good looks. Apparently, the protection only arrives when puberty does, so they go from the most beautiful children imaginable to utterly forgettable adults. They've apparently lost children to monsters this way. Then Giria turns and cuts off Harold's next touch of sass with a kiss as she holds his head in place with her uppermost arms. Stealth broken? Harold asks after they break apart. You silly man, she chides him fondly. Note to self, get daughter to go for a Jameson. Most of us are pretty young. Oh, nothing a bit of husband grooming won't cure. After all, you're a demographic of incredibly handsome, cuddly, and loving men. I'll move our colleges by hand to get my daughter a prize like that. And with that, we're done here, doctor. Thank you very much for seeing my husband last moment. He got a bit of a family scare and is getting as many eyes on a potential problem as possible, because he's thorough like that. Still not arguing my down from getting my little girl a husband. My brothers are infants, as are my nephews. My girl can wait. Don't you worry. It's more the idea of grooming that's bugging me. It's only a problem if the child is isolated and the mother-turned-lover isn't open about things. The doctor says, and Harold mentally decides he needs another doctor, and this woman needs to be on a list. Right, Harold says. Scene change. The arena, ringside, Charthorne Arcology, Zalwar. You're really not comfortable with what she said? Not in the slightest. I don't care what kind of cultural thing is going on. Grooming a child is not a good idea. Ever. There's no better way to cause lasting harm to an innocent beyond deliberate torture or the like. It has been done in less troubling ways. Many parts of the galaxy will arrange the marriage of sons as soon as they're born, often to fully grown women who help raise them. That is just disturbing. What's to stop the older woman from training or manipulating the child into growing into their idea of a proper husband or nothing? But there is a great deal of pushback if any wife finds out another wife is trying to do that. Generally, the sheer number of wives cancel out what you're so afraid of. The boy's a prize, and meddling with the prize will piss off the others. Still, just having someone that vulnerable, a lot of girls think it's on the same level of any child being raised. There has to be trust somewhere. And what do you think? I think that I will have many pointed questions if any of our children end up in such a circumstance. That's putting it mildly, Harold says as he sighs. Just when I get comfortable in the galaxy, I get reminded of this kind of shit. You still have an odd innocence to you. It's not that. It's finding things that I find abhorrent in places I don't expect it. I know there's evil. I understand and fight it. But finding it where I don't expect it, you're off guard and unprepared to deal with it. She seems so normal, Harold remarks. She is normal, just not for you, Giria says. I suppose. Is husband grooming common in Charthorne? I'm not an expert in this. Uma is the one to ask, Giria says. I doubt she has part of it, though. Her father is a lidrous feral man who was recovered from a hunting world. That's not exactly a groomed child. It would go against most interpretations of Takra culture to groom a child, wouldn't it? Maybe less than you think, Giria says. Husbands are rare as is. Taking the time to get exactly the type you want would be quite appealing. God damn it. I need to go over the adopted parents of my siblings. Again, Harold notes. You are allowed to ask for help, you know. It's a me issue and Harold begins and Giria puts her middle left index finger to his lips. And we're family. We do this together. Your clone brothers are our concern as well. Giria insists and he nods. Right. But how to broach this? Hey girls, I got reminded child grooming is a thing, and now I'm worried for my billions of clones. Care to help me scan the adoptive parents to see if any are there to groom and not rear? That should do, but a little less flippant, Giria says and Harold sighs. Right. Thank you. You're right. I also need to tell Herbert. Of course, Giria says, and he steps to the side to get some privacy to talk. She takes out her own communicator and types out a quick message. He always forgets that I have resources too. Must be that provider instinct. Scene change. Intelligence Division. The Dauntless. Centris. Herbert raises an eyebrow as he answers the communicator. Harold. Yeah, I'm sending information from a secondary doctor's scan of me. I'm also voicing concerns and letting you know I'm going to be looking into the people that adopted our clone brothers. I was just reminded that grooming was a thing and very tempting in this galaxy. We vetted everyone for that kind of thing already. The closest thing that occurred was a few families in prominent positions that started to arrange marriages for children around their own age already, but nothing intended until they're at least 15 years old. Not one of them has a bride more than 5 years older. That's not so bad, but it's still a 20-year-old woman potentially perving on a 15-year-old boy, Harold says. So we have more data? Yeah, I had a micro-sleep thanks to axiom effects, and there was zero change in my axiom presence, and it's intense, equal to 20 people of equivalent size. Yes, Herbert says and thinks. I'll add a surprise follow-up to the investigations on the families. Something on the low when they think we're not looking. But we can't just protect all of them in perpetuity. There's nowhere near enough of us. We can only do our best, Harold says glumly. which is going to be more than anyone can expect. And what will you do if pushing to make sure no one has any notions towards that whatsoever makes it worse? Not to mention, how can you even test that? People get dark thoughts. Can you read minds? Can you purge a type of thought from a person's head? There has to be something I can do. Unless you think you can step up and pull out enough primals from your ass to quintuple their population, I don't see how you can take care of all of them. We all have limits, Harold. But there has to be. Harold, I saw to the vetting while you were still defining yourself. I got them to safety. I appreciate that you care so much, but this concern of yours has a few stings in the tail for me. I know that. And you should know that as far as making sure people are safe, then feelings can get fucked. I get it. I really do. But this is one of those fields that trying too hard to make sure nothing bad happens will guarantee something else bad happens. I'll put in some surprise follow-ups. But anything more than that, and we're interfering with the lives of law-abiding citizens for the sake of paranoia. And no, Harold, this isn't a case of it not being paranoia if they're out to get us. Calm down. But there has to be something I can do. Harold, I think you're buying your own hype. Relax, Herbert says, and Harold goes silent. Are you still there? I'm thinking, Harold says. I need to do a lot of that. Sorry for being the one to say it, but no, it needed to be said. I need to think. Thank you for listening, brother. Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 449, Antlers, Assumptions, and Artillery. So an outright angel showed up? Bjorn asks incredulously. Not an angel, or rather, not confirmed as an angel. It was only able to appear visually. The scientist states, and Bjorn considers as he and his wives look at the image. Skinny girl, Lils notes. If it is a girl, I've seen curvier boys, Vera remarks. No, that's pretty on par with a thin human woman. The sort of thing you'd see from someone watching her calories, Bjorn notes. Well, she has no style at any rate. Even in my business, worst I rock it harder than that. Emma notes, and Holly just snorts at this point. And what's so funny, big girl? We've got a picture of something incredible and maybe divine, and you're criticizing her fashion and form? She asks. Oh, like you weren't thinking she couldn't stand to go to the gym. Everyone needs to go to the gym, even me. In fact, we should probably go into a proper bout of cardio to rev into calisthenics after this. Get everyone's stamina up and their blood pumping. Big guy, lay in the sugar before she goes crazy again, Salas says as Bjorn just puts an arm around Holly's shoulders. Still can't take a joke, girls? Holly asks. I know you skinny little things aren't woman enough to keep up. We're more than woman to keep up to sanity, but balancing on the tips of our fingers and easing off the axiom more and more isn't keeping up. It's nuts. It's nightly, with weights balanced on the hooves and the gravity slowly climbing up too, Holly says. I'm sorry, you do what? Finger stands with weights balanced on the feet. In increasing gravity and reducing axiom. Makes the whole body work like a machine, improves balance and resilience too, Bjorn says. And you join her in them? The scientist asks. We have competitions for who can go longer. She wins half of them. She's been working out like mad longer than I have, Bjorn states. Anyways, that's all we've got about these things. There's also the readouts of the horrors created by the Eva Grace line. The scientist states as he then switches things from the empty set of clothing of a six-armed winged woman. There is a pause as they look over the waxy skin things. What are these? Vera asks as Emma sticks out her tongue in disgust at the monster. The horrors of Albrith, created by the mad clone of a mad clone of a mad clone. Who was the modified clone of one of our own? The crazy witch was brilliant enough to genetically modify a near-perfect protection to a contact poison and how to modify an anatomy to produce this poison in mass, but not smart enough to realize that such a thing is a bad idea, the scientist states. Granted, from what we can tell, even the original clone had some failures. Apparently, she came out so twisted mentally that she's basically everything of Dr. Ivan Grace without his self-restraint, empathy, or compassion. Pretty dangerous when you're a first-class cloner. I've read the reports on those, the ones I've been cleared for at least. We've used mission reports as training lessons for dealing with exotic axiom effects. Bjorn says in a thoughtful tone. The first session, the pale monitors, I think, no. Generators. Pale generators. When they spoke the password, they would focus on an area and hit it with a lightning bolt. How do you deal with that? You figure out its limits. Use voice recordings to see if you can fake it out. And if you can, use that to track it and hit it before it can do you in. Which is what introduced the cloner, or rather her descendants, into using a poorly made mustard gas. Poorly made gas? Wouldn't it then be ineffective? No, it's still just as deadly, just much easier to detect and avoid. Normal stuff you can't tell if it's there until you start dying. The other stuff you can see and run from, Bjorn explains. I'm actually quite curious about the astral forest matter. Do you have any? We do, in fact. We intend to keep some with us as we return to cruel space. We have several different containers and experimental pieces of technology to see if we can't bring in some kind of link to the wider galaxy back with us. If the answer to that is yes, then a lot of opportunity opens up. I know, it's so exciting. We're building up momentum after momentum, and we'll be learning a huge amount no matter what. To say nothing of how much Earth itself is going to shake when we come back. Dude, dial it back a notch or 12. You're scaring the children, Bjorn says with a raised eyebrow and gets waved off by the scientist. Oh, it's nothing to be concerned about. I'm just enthusiastic. I have a love of science of all stripes, and unfortunately had to specialize as there's no everything course in any university. How did you not come out on the Dauntless? Bjorn asks. I responded to the extra orders by running a sociological experiment with the people who sent them to me and got in trouble. I got shuffled out immediately. That'd do it, Bjorn remarks. So what's your hypothesis for when you return to Earth? Out of date, I'm afraid. It's been months since I was in contact. But if things stayed static since we left and remained as such until we return, which is impossible, then there will be enormous political upheaval. China is likely to balkanize. I predict several crusades and terrorist attacks. Numerous parts of the world will be galvanized to up their spending on space programs, and there will be an enormous amount of legislation of all types that will simultaneously make it illegal and required by law to go to space. I still need to get a more in-depth study on the religions of the world to truly make a proper estimate there, and I assume that maritime law with regards to international waters and the laws preventing countries from claiming territory outside of Earth will be revisited and then debated to the point that there may be wars declared, the scientist explains. Balkanize? Veer asks. Human word, Bjorn states. It means for a larger cohesive state or country to break apart into multiple distinct countries. So called because this happened to the Balkans, which is now a collection of differing countries that cannot agree with each other anymore. The scientist explains. Now, while all that is likely to happen, I also predict that, again, based on the absurd premise that things have been static since we departed and will remain as such until we return, that numerous corporations and lobbying groups will have certain gaps opened in whatever laws will prevent expansion to begin colonizing the Sol system and for new exoplanets to be scouted out and colonized. I suspect that an entire spacer culture is on the cusp of being born, and while I cannot say for certain what will happen as there's just so much information I do not have at this time, I can't wait to see it. This is the best time to be alive, right at the great cusp of change where even if you do nothing, the entirety of our species rocks and roils to the whims of the choices you make. This is the big period of history where the exciting parts of the textbooks are. Okay, work with me now. Breathe in. Hold 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. Holly instructs him. I am in control of myself, madam. I am just very eager. This is exciting. You are going to be chewing on the walls in less than a week at this rate. No, I have mandatory shore leave starting tomorrow. I need to take a break. A vacation is not an appointment with the gallows, Bjorn reminds him. It may as well be. I want to see things, he says before checking his watch. I only have 7 hours and 33 minutes of lab work left. I can't uncover the secrets to all things in 7 hours and 33 minutes. Closer to 32 minutes now, Celis teases. Not helping, the scientist says. This way. For what? I have managed to secure specialized ultrasound equipment and will be scanning you, ladies. First-hand information on developing fetuses of human hybrid lineage. Oh, about that, Holly begins, and the scientist slowly turns. We're still really, um, he has a clipboard and is writing on it. Wait, that's data too? Everything is data, he replies. I am not a registered psychologist because my thesis was still being debated when I left Earth, and it may have gone through now, but I'm not properly accredited, so I'll just be gathering information so I can confer with fully confirmed professionals. Now, why is it that you, a very healthy young woman with a very healthy young man in the sociological situation of the galaxy, where having children is a grand symbol of prestige and capacity, it's not the best time to have children yet? We can still have fun, though. So self-gratification and intimacy are still on the table without the risk of children. This is excellent. Now, what would you need in place to have children? Can you give me both ideal and bare minimum scenarios in that order? Scene change. Rambays the inevitable Zal War. There is a deep humming in the area as they start looking around. All right, so this is the Repair and Manufacture Support Craft. Also known as the RAM, the bridge and engines are downright basic, but these repair bays are both practical and straightforward. We have magnetic and gravity-based cranes with hard light support beams to lock things in place to ensure that the contact points can be broken the moment a project is finished or if something we're repairing or salvaging proves itself suddenly hostile. The mechanic with them states, "These things are far, far too complicated for a simple projection," Holly states, looking at a hard light projector. Well spotted. These do double duty in that they can be formed to be cast. You can pour in molten metal to make produce plating for ships at a fast clip. It's a little crude and they will need a bit more attention as we go, but it speeds up the opening of mass production with ease. Let's us get the outer hulls of ships, weapons, and more produced in short order. Couple that with the systems in here and we can bolt it all together in no time at all. But how do you interface with everything? These things are huge. How do you do detail work? Lils asks. Most of that is handled inside or done on the spot when the outer hull is finished. Right, quick question, Vera asks, looking around. Yes? How are you going to make any of this work in cruel space? The laboratory I kind of get, seeing how it all fails is the point. But what about this place? It's so heavily axiom reliant that, we're not taking the RAM or RAD into cruel space, the mechanic says, and everyone turns to him. The plan is to leave everything we can't take with us behind and have these two sections left behind, preferably in undaunted hands. But who knows? Personally, I'd like to see this ship build another Dauntless class under it, but you know what they say, wish in one hand, shit in the other. Which is going to be filled first, the mechanic asks. Turn out an entire Dauntless class. Can this thing do that? Bjorn asks. Technically, it already can. It's just that it's a lot of resources, but if you can source them off a mineral-rich asteroid or a dust-heavy system, then you can pump out another Dauntless class. Strap the RAM and RAD to it, and away you go with a mobile warship that can produce more, the mechanic says in an almost dreamy tone. The sheer amount of logistical power allowing a ship to reproduce in ways that would see entire fleets of fleets being produced at an ever more exponential rate. It would be amazing. Sounds like the start of an action film. Mysterious fleet of hostile ships descends upon a poorly defended world from the darkness between stars with no hint of where they come from. Holly remarks with a grin. The plot twist of it being crewed by well-toned men turns the genre from action to titillation, though, Lil says, and there's some laughter. Yeah, but imagine if you could do it in the other way. Some kind of modification to the girls to survive cruel space and an entire fleet of eager and gorgeous girls dropping down out of the sky for snoo-snoo. You're either fresh from, eager for, or in dire need of shore leave, Bjorn notes. Eager for and in dire need. Albrith was under siege by that freak Grace, and then shit got really quickly on Scathach, and mine had to canceled on account of death cultist ship bitch and then a literal godly ascension, the engineer says. Ah, that's why I've been hearing gears grind. I'm off in 2 hours and not coming back on until we leave the planet. I have so much shore leave saved up. Oh, we can show you where the best clubs are. Dancing, drinking, food, and all the girls willing to pile on you in the ways I know humans like, Emma says. Might want to bring a few friends, though. That way you won't be drained dry, Holly remarks. All right then, I clearly need some addresses and something other than uniform to wear. Wear the uniform. A man in a uniform is good stuff, Salas says. Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 450. Antlers, Assumptions, and Artillery. They exit the vehicle in a parking garage-like area in the outer parts of the Shrike Enclave. It was different from the other arcologies for many reasons, but looking past the physical differences or species differences, it was an outlier because it didn't actually represent another nation. It wasn't effectively an embassy. It was a home for citizens that had a very clear preference for people moving in and a very clear culture. And the culture was the Valran Shrikatalan. Sir, I think you should be careful, one of his bodyguards states. Why? It's another bit of galactic rhyming, or whatever the official name is. They have the term Shrike in their name, and they have some similarities to the butcher birds of Earth. I'm not familiar with shrikes. Small birds, little hook on the beak, but looks harmless. But in truth, they have one of the most sadistic hunting methods in the bird kingdom. They perch around thorn bushes and barbed wire and use them as pantries by impaling their living prey on the spikes to kill them slowly so they keep. Oh, and this Valran demographic is similar? Observer Wu asks. In the ancient past, apparently. Just as they were being uplifted, the Shriktalans were given an ultimatum to be peaceful or be extinct. They choose peace. Apparently. Observer Wu considers as he scans the area. The plumage of the Shriktalans is less distinctive than Jacob's feathering. He had a more auburn or russet plumage, that middle point between brown and red, where some feathers looked to be made of copper. But he had the pattern. The wings were the same general shape, and talons looked the same. Sir? Just thinking about the difference between Captain Shriktalan and the local Shriktalans. Something to ask about, Observer Wu states before his communicator buzzes. It's a quick text with an apology. Apparently a meeting has gone long, and his contact was running late. He texts them not to hurry too much. Getting injured would slow things even more. Well, we seem to have some time. Let's speak to the locals. They're more waved through the security than anything else. Something Observer Wu makes a point to ask about later, and they're in. The Shrek's talon is as a Valran is. Feathers instead of hair, which gives the eyebrows an intense look even when completely calm. Wings for arms with a thumb at the center to help with handling things, and large talon bird feet that they walk on with a half-strutting, half-stalking, natural stride. The feathers of a Shrikatalon are primarily off-white with a dark brown along the lower half of the wings and a distinct V at the back of the head in black feathers. Jacob Shrikatalon had traded his off-white for his auburn, his darker brown for russet, and his black feathers gleamed as copper. As Observer Wu spots the rare male Shrikatalon, he notes that Jacob is indeed one of them, but with a palette swap. Mixed heritage, perhaps. A few of them had inversions where the pale off-white was traded with the black to give an almost photo-negative look to them. And a few Valran had all black plumage and larger wings. Also a subtly different cast to the face and features. A different demographic? Likely. There's a nearby group that includes several Shriktalons and a few of the pure black plumage ones speaking with each other about something. Observer Wu walks over with a friendly smile on. Things haven't been dealt with. I mean, really, what do those monsters offer this world except fear and pain? You never know. Ecosystems are extremely interconnected, even in the least likely places. For all we know, the ice worms might be essential to preventing some other animal from exploding in population and devouring all plants, which would then cause a biosphere collapse. And the regular culling of the monster's numbers doesn't? Considering how fast the things breed, it's never about numbers for them. So long as they're above zero, we'll be at saturation level in the year and... Hello? Who are you? My name is Damien Wu. I'm an observer sent from the human homeworld of Earth. He says, flashing the totem in his lapel to let them see that he's not actually a cloaken. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about, well, a few topics, to be honest. Your opinion on humans and the undaunted, not to mention pass on any words you might have to say to my people. Oh, that? Do you have any proof or, I recognize him, one of the black-feathered ones states. He's been on the news a few times as the observer. Yes, call me Wu, Observer Wu states. Now, I appear to have interrupted a conversation. What does the galactic citizen speak of? He interrupts us to ask what, okay, this is a day of it then. We were talking about the tundra worms. Edna's pet Latara had slipped out of her grip and was eaten in short order. She's still upset. It was earlier today. I want those monsters dead. All they do is make people afraid to walk on the ground or be outside the arcologies. And they're still natural creatures that are part of the ecosystem, which as the name suggests is a system, meaning that the parts rely on one another. We don't know what wiping out the tundra worms might do. As I was saying, the plant life might be relying on them to keep herbivore levels down so they don't just devour everything green on the world that keeps the air from turning into poison. They're hideous. They're monsters. No one debates these things, but they are natural to Zalwar, and that counts for a lot. But my little Mimi, the Vauran woman says, and she's embraced by one of her friends. Can we change topics? Mr. Human here wants to know about things, right? Well, thank you. And yes, perhaps to start things off, could you tell me about Vauran demographics? I've met a Captain Shrek that has distinctly reddish plumage, but the same patterns and wings of the other Shrek. Red feather, she must have red feather ancestry. He actually, but how many types of Vauran are there? Oh, well, there are pacifists, Shrek, the artisan red feathers, the scientist dark plumes like Edna here, the graceful coast gliders, the fierce meadow wings, I'm not sure what the word is, but they're stereotyped as farmers, night talons, and the roaming eversongs. Is there a reason the night talons and Shrike have similar names? They use similar sounding words for their own people, despite never actually coming into contact with each other, Edna says, clearly using the conversation to stop thinking about her lost pet for a few moments. I did a bit of digging. There are some parallels with birds from your world in wing shape and plumage, but missing a few types. Shrike are shrikes, of course. Red feathers are hawks. Dark plumes are corvids, with coast gliders being herons, and meadowwings waterfowl. Night talons are owls, and eversongs are parrots. No eagles or falcons? Or vulture or retite? Interesting. And each of them have stereotypes for each others. Also, I think the word you were looking for with night talons was agrarians, Observer Wu says. Yes, that is the word I was looking for, thank you, Edna says. Now, as to numbers, I think dark plumes are most common, roughly 20-something% of the Vauran population. 25 on average. Shrek are 15, red feathers are 10, coast gliders and meadowwings are 10% as well, and night talons and eversongs are 15. Roughly. The exact numbers shift, but a quarter of all Vauran are dark plumes. Very interesting. But then why is this the Shrike enclave and not the Vauran or dark plume enclave? Observer Wu asks. Oh, that we, my Shrike sisters often have a great deal of cultural guilt, a new voice says from the side, and Observer Wu turns to see an officially dressed Shrike woman standing nearby. His bodyguards are facing her, but clearly dismissed her as a threat. Their postures are unbothered, and their hands nowhere near their weapons. Observer Wu, I see your curiosity is worthy of a dark plume. Couldn't wait to ask questions? It is my duty and delight to ask questions, ma'am, almost as much as getting answers. I see. Well, before you ask then, the Shrikatalan culture means we often end up moving from place to place. Shrikatalan enclaves are rare, and the one here on Zalwar is a rare beast indeed. Many Shrike fleets the galaxy over pay homage here, or use this as a cultural touchstone, including your undaunted Shrike, Captain Jacob. It's on his recommendation I came here. Good, he needed to come here to get back in touch with his roots after he was torn away from them, which is actually something I wanted and, hmm, I'm not sure about your customs. Is it rude to ask here, should we get to someplace private? I've also already interrupted the conversation of these young ladies and, oh no, keep going. This is interesting, Edna says. And there goes any reason we shouldn't speak in public. I'm not going to be discussing any secrets, so there should be no issue, his contact says. Excellent. The more people willing to talk, the clearer the picture gets, Observer Wu says happily. Good. And for clarity, girls, I am President Anita Thermal Shrike-Talon. I know. I voted for you, ma'am, one of the girls says. Always good to meet one of my constituents. Any way I can get the votes for the next election from you other girls? Oh, we're friends and family, not a residence, ma'am. We don't get a vote. No matter, it's good to meet you either way. After all, a visitor is just a few forms away from being a citizen, Anita says. Now, Observer Wu, you were asking about Shrike-Talon patterns, right? I was, and I have received an overview of Valorant demographics, so a question has come up. And that would be, if the Eversongs are known to be roamers, then are they more mobile than the Shrike-Talons that seem to have few permanent settlements? An excellent question, and the answer is that the Shrike-Talons congregate in much larger flocks. There are entire Shrike-Talons fleets and mobile stations, but they're rarely either for Eversongs. They prefer it that way. They're natural explorers and struggle to sit still, so they gather in much smaller groups. You'll find Eversong ships, but there are only a small number of Eversong fleets or stations, so they have a reputation as roamers. Now, Captain Jacob Shrike-Talon was concerned about humans, misunderstanding cultural pacifism, and wanted to make sure that I and mine fully understand that it's neither stupid nor suicidal. He already explained it once in his own words. But if he thinks more needs to be said, then I would very much like to hear it, Observer Wu says, and Anita nods. Well, to begin with, you need the history of the pacifism. On the homeworld, the Shrike-Talons were a warrior people, comparable to the Aztecs of Earth. A blood cult thoroughly convinced they needed to kill others and brutalize them for the sake of survival. So the Shrike-Talon culture was based on it. Mercy was a weakness that would have the gods turn from you and damn your family. Then came first contact. We nearly drove the outer galaxy to quarantine our world through sheer viciousness. Then they met the other Valren and learned that we were just that twisted. So they fell upon us with greater wrath than anything we ever credited to the gods and gave us a choice. We choose to live. I remember reading something about oaths. Oh, those have long since expired. They were generational oaths of peace and mercy. We become peaceful, and we would be given mercy. They expired a long time ago, but upholding them had become baked into our very culture, our way of life. And why wouldn't it? We were gaining prosperity beyond imagining by following a path of peace, so we stuck with it. But we're not bound by it, and the fun thing about a pacifist is that we make excellent neighbors, neighbors that people would prefer to have unmolested. But that doesn't help much when you're outright attacked. No, but that is only an issue when you can't escape. Remember, most Shrike-Talons are mobile. Furthermore, while many Shrike-Talons are completely nonviolent, there is a large minority among us willing to fight defensive wars. Couple that with allies and the even rarer aggressive Shrike-Talons, and we're nowhere near as fragile a target as people think. Besides, in space, an engine strong enough to be interesting and a hull powerful enough to endure, its use is weapon and armor enough for almost any situation. So in other words, while a Shrike-Talon community can be attacked, it's not worth the effort, and it earns too much ill will for it to be common. Oh yes, blood from a stone is easier and ends up with less people righteously hunting for your head, Anita confirms before gesturing with her left wing. Now come, I am sure you have more questions, but I am in the mood for a walk, and during it I would also to show off the beauty of this enclave. Gladly, madam, Observer Wu states.